caution to begin with. If you came here for anything practical today, you're very silly. There is absolutely nothing practical in what I'm going to share with you today. That's not the point of what this is about. If you want something practical, I can do that for you. Follow your strategy, honor your inner authority. That's my practicality for the day. If you do that, everything will be fine anyway. This is about larger themes, and it's about understanding that we can participate in what is going on in a much larger sense in the world around us, and not the way that it's filtered to us through the way in which we see history, the way in which our cultures, put out their programs. One of the things that has always been a joy for me about human design is that it's given me a chance to understand much larger processes. And there are these magnificent processes at work, and we are living in a very special time. At lunch today, I was having lunch with Ilse Sendler, and I said, well, it's going to be a depressing afternoon. And she said, oh, really? I said, yeah. And I don't mean to set you up for a bad day, right? But I want you to understand that we're at the end of something. And we are, as humans, in this particular form, in this particular time, that we really don't fit in. We don't. We're in the middle of something. We're kind of a bridge, in a way, that's carrying a whole new construct into the future. And it's not our future. So we live in a world in which there are a great many things that are very difficult for us to understand, that it's exceedingly difficult for most human beings to come to grips with just the basic simpleness of what they are, just to be able to live correctly as oneself, let alone have to take on the burden of understanding that we're in an age that is coming to an end. This image up here, this is one of many kinds of different illustrations of the Hindu Brahmin seven-centered, seven-chakra being. According to what I know, in 1781, coincidental to the discovery of the planet Uranus by Herschel, that we moved from being this being with this infrastructure, we moved from a seven-centered or a seven-chakra system, and we moved into a nine-centered system. In other words, a mutation. You know, when you look at the body graph, and you see this nine-centered being. At the top of the body graph, it says rave chart, or whatever, rave. It's not any of you. Certainly not me. Not at all. And it's something really to grasp. We live in a nine-centered vehicle. That is true. And we have been living in nine-centered vehicles since 1781. But they're not for us. I mean, they were never intended to be for us. They were intended to be for certain of our descendants who will emerge after 2027, which is not very far away, who are going to carry a mutation in the solar plex center, and I'll talk about that today. And these are what I refer to as rave children. In other words, they will come into the world to live correctly, not in this vehicle, but in the new one. And when you look at evolution, you have these enormous spaces of time. They're huge. And it's a different perception when you're looking at time that way. It's totally different. We look at time within the limitation of our short little lives. And that moment from 1781 to 2027 that seems to us to be a lot of time, maybe 2.5 centuries, we look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of time. I mean, 250 years ago seems like a long time ago. In an evolutionary sense, it's a breath, it's nothing. It's a whoosh. one of the dilemmas of modern beings like us is that not only do we have the limitation that we're not born to recognize our wholeness, that we are designed by our very design to be limited, that not only are we limited in the way in which we have access to consciousness, but we're limited in that we're not equipped to operate fully within the design that we have. Since 1610, even longer ago now, in 1610 we entered into a global cycle. You give me image number 5. Yeah, the wheel. Let's see if I can see that up here. If you go up here to the 37th gate, right now the way in which the whole wheel turns in a larger way, it's called the precession of the equinox, and it moves this way. In other words, it moves around clockwise. In other words, it moves differently from the way in which the sun and the planets move around the wheel. Okay? When you look at the very beginning of human design and you look at any description of it, it'll say that there's a synthesis between Eastern and Western astrology as an example. And one of the things that you get from the Eastern astrology, that it's incorporated into the synthesis of human design, is this precession of the equinox. And this precession of the equinox is an enormously slow movement. In 1610, the precession entered into the 37th gate, but it doesn't enter in at the first line. It enters in at the 6th line. Remember, it's going backwards in that sense. So in 1610, we entered into a cycle where the pinpoint theme was the 37th gate. It's actually a cross, and it's a cross that's called the cross of planning. And we are still living in the cross of planning. The cycle of the cross of planning is from 1610 to 2027. This is why 2027 has this big number in design in this era, because it's a very significant point. In other words, what we're going through is that we have been moving since 1610 through the lines. So for example, in 1960, I'll tell you a little story. My design. I'm a 5-1. So I have a first line unconscious. And I have 10 first lines in my design. So I'm very much somebody who is attuned to the first line investigation and foundation and all of these things that you find in first line themes. But when I was born, excuse me, when I was born in 1948, I was born into a global cycle that was in the second line theme. In other words, since 1610, slowly moving 6th line, 5th line, 4th line, 3rd line. When I was born, it was a second line theme. And in the first 13 years approximately of my life, I was totally out of place. I mean, I felt like I had been dropped on the wrong planet. Literally. Felt like, why was I here? And I had other dilemmas with that. I'm very individual in my design, and I'm a manifester and so forth and so on. And all of that added up together, I felt very, very strange. When I turned 13, the global cycle transited from being a second line global cycle theme into a first line theme. The whole world changed. In 2027, it's going to enter into a 6th line theme. If I'm here, I think it's going to be boring. It's not my trip. That's not my trip. I'm very happy with my first line residence. It's all working nicely. We have been, since 1960, in this first line theme, which is literally the end of this cycle. Let's think about the cycle for the moment. Think about this cross of planning. All crosses, they have 4 arms. So you have on one side, you have the 37th gate, and its polarity is the 40th gate on the other side of the wheel. Now the 3740 is very unusual. If you look at the whole infrastructure of the mandala in design, you'll see that there are 3 oppositions that form definitions. The 2034, forms of definition, they're in opposition. The 4323, the mental connection, the individual connection between the ajna and the throat. And of course you have the only connection that is here between the solar plex center and the ego. That's the 4037. The other side of that cross is the 9th gate and the 16th gate. So we have these 4 themes. So let's think about these themes for a moment. When you have a global cycle that brings with it a definition, you have something that's very, very powerful. Right now, as I speak, since November, and it will last till late in January. Right now we have a definition in the transiting field that is Neptune in the 13th gate. So you've got Neptune here in the 13th gate right now, and on the other side you have Saturn in the 33rd gate. The last time it happened was 5,000 years ago. I mean, the last time this kind of configuration existed. We're living in a time of deep polarization. All of this is part of a long-term movement pointing us towards 2027 and what is in fact a forking of the past in humanity. In the Jan B Player, I do live Sunday lectures. And a couple of months ago, I did a lecture which was called The Forking of the Past, and it was specifically about this transit. Now, what makes this transit so fascinating is that it's not about what we're experiencing now, which is basically simply people choosing sides, which is the way it gets lived out as an imprint now. But as I speak, there are children being born, by the thousands, by the way, constantly, all the time, streaming in, incarnating, carrying with them this construct. And in 2027, they're all going to enter into their 20s. In other words, millions of them. I'm talking about millions of them who are going to be a specific generation with this specific configuration. And this configuration, this 3313 transit, there are 2 specific aspects to it. A long-term one that lasts for 2/3 of the transit, and a short-term one. And it's based on the nodes. I'm not going to get into the details, but nonetheless, it is something to understand that out of this generation, you're going to have that smaller group that is going to have the capacity to give birth to rave children. In other words, they're the ones who are going to carry within them the mutation that is going to lead to the transformation in the solar plex system. Let's talk about that for a second. In human design, we say that there are 3 potential areas of awareness in the vehicle. Right? You have splenic awareness. Well, splenic awareness is something that is very basic and fundamental. It's actually the function of B cells. In other words, inside of everybody's immune system, we have a service that is provided for us. And that service is provided for us by being able to recognize and to be able to determine alien forces entering into your vehicle so that they can be defended against. And everything about the splenic system is about the combination of the fear of survival and the basis of intelligence. And the basis of intelligence is devising strategies in order to keep you alive. So the splenic center is about basic intelligence. Now think about it, that strategies to keep you alive have become very sophisticated. We call them our careers. I mean, and they go in many, many different places. Here is the root of what we call basic intelligence. So, you know, the instinct that is there, you know, in the tribal configuration, and here in the middle, the intuition, and here on the outside, judgmentation, these aspects of intelligence are here in the spleen. Our real dilemma is that we have to deal with the ajna center, the so-called mind. It's not just ajna, it's the head-ajna combination. And you see, the head-ajna combination is connected to the greatest illusion of all. Matter of fact, it's totally dependent on it. Your eyes. I mean, when I look at the ajna, I never forget that the 11th gate is the left eye and the 17th gate is the right eye. Never forget that. It's about seeing. It's about seeing. The mind is all about seeing. And even when the mind closes the eyes, it sees on the inside. Everything about mental intelligence is about visualization. It's what makes the mind more powerful than the spleen. Because the very capacity of the mind to create visualization almost instantly, neurons firing at the speed of light, is that it gives us this assumption that our mind is actually able to grasp the Maya and make decisions in the Maya. It's not, but nonetheless, it's a nice trick. Eh? It's nice to have one of these, visual wonder machines, because that's what it is. And when you're dealing with mind and you're dealing with the spleen, you're dealing with basic fears. Underlying all intelligence, all awareness, is fear. It's the price you pay for being a bioform. As long as you're a bioform, you're always going to be afraid for your life. Always. And you're going to be afraid for your life from the outside, and you're going to be afraid for your life from the inside. It's what it is to be a bioform. It's always fear. So there is fear here, which is basic survival fear, and there's fear up here, which is the fear that one cannot communicate successfully with the other. See, when you really grasp what mind is about, that it's not here to make decisions for you in your life, but it's here to be able to allow you to communicate your vision with somebody else, and for them to communicate their vision with you, you begin to see what mental intelligence was intended to be for. And then we have the solar plex. Now, the solar plex right now is a horror. Sorry for all of you that are emotional, but what to do, eh? It's a horror. It's just a horror. And it's not simply a horror for the 50% of humanity that have it open, like me. It's a horror for those who are emotional and are unaware. I mean, they have to live with it after all. I have great empathy for those who have to live with being emotionally defined. You have my sympathy, my empathy, my love, good. And don't give me any bad waves. That's the deal, right? Now keep on making nice, but don't give me bad waves. The sixth gate. This is a wonderful, mysterious thing. See, the sixth gate carries within it two things. It carries the wave. And because the wave is brute, because the solar plex is a motor, that wave is incredibly powerful. One of the difficulties, for example, if you know 59.6s or you are a 59.6, one of the difficulties for the sixth gate is it doesn't know how to express its emotions because they are not streamed into specific lines as they are here, when you see them in their proper streams. So that, you end up over here on the outside and you've got the abstract emotional system, and, all of that is rooted in desire, and desire is rooted in the crash wave. So you desire and desire and desire and desire, and whether you get it or not, you're going to crash anyway. It's that wonderful zoom, and you hit the ground. It's in the six, but sixes never have a crash. It's the source of it. If you go into the middle and you go to the worst emotional beings, they're the worst emotional beings because they fool you. If you're unemotional like I am, and you meet somebody who's abstract emotional, right away. You just back off. You can feel it. I mean, you can really feel it, and you can tell the difference between whether you should approach them or not. You can tell right away where they are in their wave. It's very easy. I mean, if you're open, it's very easy. But when you meet somebody who's an individual emotionally, a 39.55, a 22.12, you don't know. As a matter of fact, they could be in a terrible mood, and you don't really know until they let you have it. And they can let you have it, by the way. But their wave is a plane. It's one of the dilemmas of being individual emotionally, is that you can end up in a plane of a low end, and it can last for years. You can end up on a plane that's slightly up, And it'll last for years. It can also last for days, weeks, and months. And in between, what you have is spiking. Spikes. Rarely, unfortunately, do the spikes go up. You know, so you have individuals that are going along and you've been seeing them every day for months and they always have the same level, and then one day it's all gone. You know, they've spiked and you didn't know it was coming. You can feel an abstract wave building. You know, when I piss somebody's off who's abstract, you know, I can feel this crescendo of rising wave. You don't get that with the individual. And if you go back here to the sixth gate, the sixth gate doesn't function like that. It doesn't, because it's the source, and it's a very confused source, because not only is it the source of the waves, but it's also the source of the potential awareness that lies underneath. In fact, to understand any process in human design, the deepest meditation is the meditation of polarities. You know, it's something I do at the end of my visit here, when I look at the nodes of the moon. And because the nodes are fascinating, eh? The nodes are the way in which we're intended to see. Everybody's entitled to 1/32nd slice, you know, of the Maya. Everybody has a chance for their view. And when you look at the wheel itself, particularly if you're new to design, when you look at the wheel, look at the polarities, look at the charts, the hexagrams. They're mirrors. They're exact mirrors of each other. So you cannot talk about the 6 without talking about the 36. And you see, the 36 is part of a process here that's called the human experiential way. And it starts with the 41st gate, which is the initiating codon in genetics. Everything starts here. This is the root of all desire. It is the root for experience in the world. Everything about this is the drive for experience in the world. So that here you have this pressure that is there in the 41 to drive the experiential way. You have the fates, the 30th gate, the gate of desire. The fates get in the way always. You know, the abstract people always want to be logical. If I do this, this, and this, I'll get that. That's logic. Abstract always tries that. You know, if I have a desire and I do this, I'm going to get that. Right, sure, yeah. No, doesn't work that way. Because there's the 30th gate, and the 30th gate didn't. Sorry. Maybe you try it this way. No, I don't want to go that way, but tough. You know. See, I love the 30th gate. There would be no entertainment on this planet, I assure you. You know, we would truly be dull if it weren't for the 30th gate, because the 30th gate takes away the illusion that life is logical. It isn't. You know, it appears in the Maya to be this vast chaos. And of course, the vast chaos is ruled by this whole emotional process. And when you get to the 36th gate, you get to the gate that just wants to do something new. You know? Anything new. You know, from positions that were never imagined in the Kama Sutra, to jobs that were never imagined on planet Earth. Anything, as long as it's a new experience. Because this is the great gate of inexperience. And all of it leads in the end to the 35th gate, which is the gate of progress. This is the human experiential way. And that human experiential way, when raves are actually born post-2027, the only aspect of the entire emotional system for them that will not participate at an awareness level is this stream. And this stream carries the deepest qualities of what we call the emotional wave. And what is happening now is that since 1610, since 1781 and the advent of the nine-centered being, all of this is connected in one movement. What has been going on is that our vehicles are going through a physical mutation, and the physical mutation is focused on this solar plex center. Because the solar plex center is not an awareness center now. It's not. It isn't at all. Now, think about Pluto. Pluto's a funny thing. It's not a planet, but they call it a planet. It's debris, but it's interesting, Pluto. Nothing has a greater impact on larger cycles. Think about the magic of this, that in 1781, with the advent of the nine-centered being, Pluto was here in the 41st gate in the initiating codon, the codon that starts all processes, all processes. You know, when you imagine the 41st gate, imagine the genetic code as being a way that we could write things out in language, and what you would get is that the capitalization of the first letter of the first word of every sentence, that's the 41st gate. It starts everything. So in 1781, you had Pluto in the 41st gate. Guess where it's going to be in 2027? It's going to be in the 41st gate. We are living in a vast Plutonic cycle. And it is this deep transformation that is taking place in humanity. Okay, so how does it work? And where is it going? The first answer is heat. Heat. Let's go back to the cross of planning. What do we have there? In the cross of planning since 1610, the most dynamic theme has been this channel 4037, this emotional channel. And the 4037 is the channel of community. It is the channel of the bargain. It is the channel of the marriage contract. It is the fundamental channel of building communities upon which the state is built, upon which our whole structure of government and politics is built. It's all built here in the 4037. And everything about the 4037 is about providing for the needs of the community. You know, I talk a lot about that the age of innovation is coming to an end. You know, all of you that are expecting to be beamed up, I'm sorry, but chances are you're not going to get there. You'll be lucky to be able to get food in the supermarket. The reality is that we are living in a time in which there is a fading in that sense of innovation because the awareness system that is evolving is totally different. Yet since we entered into this cross of planning theme, what have we had since that beginning of the 17th century? We have the so-called industrialization of the planet. And two things came with the industrialization of the planet. Two things. The transformation of rural diet into a much broader field. In other words, you know, for millennium and millennium and millennium, people only ate what grew in their valley. And if they were lucky, they might have traded with the people who grew something in the next valley. But with the industrial age came something else. Came the beginning of this process of mass importation of products from other places. The second thing is heat. You know, it's one of my standing jokes. There's only one thing that I agree with in common with George Bush. Don't sign Kyoto. You know? I'm one of the few people on the planet who proudly and happily embraces global warming. Because that's what we have been having since the beginning of this cycle. It is what the whole process to initiate the nine-centered being is all about. When you look at the graphs, you know, you got a seven-centered chakra being and you got a nine-centered. It was already there. I mean, it was already there in the older model. We're talking about mutation. I mean, all we're talking about is mutation. And mutation doesn't come out of nowhere. These are aspects of our genetics waiting for moments in time and conditions to arise. And from the moment that we entered into the, the cycle of the cross of planning, we entered into an age of increased heat. If we could have accurate body temperatures that were taken by, medical people, and of course we don't. If you could have those accurate temperatures from people who were born before 1781 and people who were born after 1781, you will see that their body temperatures, their inner standard body temperature, is different. We're hotter. We are hotter. And it's getting hotter all the time. This is the mutative field at work. Everything about the transformation of the solar plex system is a combination of heat and diet. When I first started to publicly talk to people about design in the beginning of the 90s, I wanted them to understand that there was a mutation at work, because it's necessary for us to understand that this is a time in which we are all under pressure to grasp essential truths. And it was very easy for me to point out to them how they could watch it. I remember doing that with some of my earliest contacts in design. See, the solar plex system is a dilemma. Evolution has no sympathy, has no empathy, does not care about those that are victimized by the process. And please understand that this is taking place at a huge level now in humanity. And the two things that I pointed to, the first one is autism. In 1992, I started to talk about, that we would have to pay attention to increasing and, phenomenal rates of increase in autism as we move towards 2027. And the other thing that I spoke about in 1992 was that we were going to have a rise in the incidence of prostate cancer. Those two themes are themes, I have recordings of me talking about those things in the early 90s. If you look at the statistics for both autism and prostate cancer since 1992 till today, you will see that the growth has been exponential in the impact of these particular afflictions on humanity. And all of that is connected to a solar plex center that is in mutation. These are actually beings who are, it's difficult to find a way to express that. They're born at the wrong time would be the only way you could say it. It doesn't make sense. In other words, they have a mutated solar plex in a time in which it's not supported. So what you end up seeing is the negative aspect of the mutation, and in that negative aspect you see the prostate cancer and you see the autism. By the way, those themes are here in the 19th gate, down here, and the 49th gate over here, which is part of the, the tribal emotional system. Everything about the solar plex center changing is that it's never going to change for us, It's not like post-2027, if you're emotional, suddenly you're going to be a rave, and you're not, And for me, and it's one of the themes that, think about it this way. I live in Spain, and on the Spanish mainland, not far from actually where I live, but around the Barcelona area, north of that, the Basque Country, about 80 or 90,000 years ago, you had Neanderthals and so-called Cro-Magnon, or modern human beings, living together. And when I say living together, I don't imagine that they had much to do with each other. However, they certainly would have had occasion to bump into each other. There are many assumptions that our kind, which I refer to affectionately as killer monkeys, that we were much more efficient at wiping out things than they were, and that we probably eliminated them. There's something to understand about us. We have a limitation. You know, everybody who has some kind of esoteric yearning to feel the oneness and the wholeness and blah, blah, blah. This has been going on in humanity for a very long time because it is a future that is out there, but it's not ours. I mean, it's not ours. I mean, we are encased in these self-enclosed shells, and we do the very best we can to step outside of that and try to, you know, experience oneness, but it is truly our limitation, because we are always limited to our own self-reflected consciousness. The rave. There are many levels of knowledge. I was given many different kinds of forms. And the most interesting forms for me ultimately were transpersonal. What's called a penta and what's called a wa. A penta is a transpersonal form that's made up of 5 auras. And it's basically the way in which everything operates. The dilemma for humanity is that we are not designed to have conscious access to what it's like to be in this field. We're simply driven by them. We all emerge in pentas because it's the basic family construct. I mean, everything about the way in which our movement, everything about the materialism of being human, all of these things are rooted in penta. The potential of the solar plex is that rave children will have the capacity to be able to participate consciously in a penta. Now, we can't imagine what that means. You know what it's like when you love somebody. And there's always those moments in love where you realize, but who is it that I'm loving? You know? And it doesn't matter not only how much you love them, no matter how long you love them, no matter how much communication may be a part of your bond, you're not one. You're never one. Because the passenger in you, it's locked in the back seat of the limo. It does not get out. It does not open doors and say, hey, come on in. Let's be conscious together. Doesn't happen. Doesn't exist. We're limited. Something else is coming. This is the whole process that's at work in the Solar Plex Center. Is this transformation. Now let's go back for a moment. Can we go back to, give me the third illustration? Yeah. It's, I don't know how well any of you can see this, but basically it's a tracking. You know, here is the 7-centered being and its time, and here's the 9-centered being coming in, and here's 2027, and it's post-2027 that this vehicle is finally going to be ready in that sense. In other words, the 9-centered vehicle that we began to operate through in 1781, that this 9-centered vehicle is constantly in this process of mutation. You know, it is preparing for what is its eventuality to be able to house solar plex awareness. Now, there isn't anything in human design that has not been able to stand up to scrutiny whenever it's looked at. And when I first began to talk about the solar plex system as the potential of the awareness that we're moving towards, Anybody that investigates modern research into the solar plex, Google it. Just do a Google and find out. It is unbelievable what they are discovering in the human solar plexus. That there are more neurons in the human solar plex than in our brain. More. Many, many, many more. They don't know why. Of course not. What's going on? What's it for? It can't be for all that emotional stuff. I mean, there is this enormous potential that is in the solar plex. And the thing that's so interesting is that the real dysfunction on the planet has so much of its root in the solar plex wave. What the emotional system does to us. But I want to give you a very odd perspective. Nothing, there's no line that's drawn in the sand in that sense. Think about the child that is born the moment before the first nine-centered being is born in 1781. And let's say that child is going to have a nice long life, 80 years, 90 years. That child's going to live well into the 19th century, into the 1880s, maybe the 18, lucky if they get there. What I'm really talking about is that everything that we see out here, everything that we live with, the way in which the world is constructed for us, all of this has nothing to do with our design. It doesn't. It has nothing to do with our design. All we're doing is fulfilling the potential of the old seven-centered being. In 2007, we're going to reach an absolutely incredible moment. I mean, it's an incredible moment. Because in 2007, for the first time in all of human history, we're going to have more people living in cities than live on the land. Now, everything about the city, the community, all of that is held together by the cycle we are in. This 40-37 cycle that we are in, this cycle of community and of the bonds, the institutions that this channel demands, schools, police, governments, all of that. Worse than that, this has been the great era of work. Oh, shit. I mean, if you have to have a cycle, what a cycle. I mean, work, work, work. Nothing but work. All of it yanking on the ego. The 40th gate is the love of work. Funny enough. But it's also one of the gates of denial. Why should I work? Because I love you. Why should I work? Because we need to eat. And on and on and on. The answer is normally coming from the 37th gate on the other side. And the 40th gate being a gate of willpower. And all of it is about the 40th gate and its stomach. Figuratively speaking, the 37th gate is the mouth and the 40th gate is the stomach. And everything about our time, all of it, has been based on being able to make sure that everybody is being looked after in the larger bargain. So we have the bargains that started at a tribal level that became bargains of national constitutions, that we gave over responsibility to educate to institutions. We've given over most of our lives to the control of institutions. All of this is 4037. I spent many, many, many years traveling, touring, teaching. Spent a lot of time in hotel rooms looking out windows. And I was in New York a couple of years ago, and I was very high up in one of these buildings. And I was looking out, and I was just thinking, It's a miracle. Everybody eats. I mean, it's a miracle, right? 7, 8, 9, 10 million people. Can you imagine what it takes? What coordination it takes? What cooperation it takes? What rules it takes to be able to get all of that done? Unbelievable. I mean, we don't think about it. Are we ever in trouble? I mean, most human beings can't even stand the sight of a gutted animal anymore. Let alone know how to catch one. Most human beings could not germinate a seed. You realize that? I mean, most human beings would have to gather rather than plant because they don't know how to do it. They don't. And you think it's going to last, do you? I mean, that's the great joke. Right now, for every 2 barrels of oil we use, we find 1. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that solution. We know where that's going. See, everybody thinks that we're going to come up with better and better ways to be able to organize everything because it looks that way. It looks that way. Everything speeds up at the end of a cycle. We're racing towards the end of this cycle. And it's a first-line theme since 1960. So we're getting all this great stuff, right? We're finding out all these essential pieces of information about this thing and that thing and the other thing. In a larger sense, this cycle includes the 61-1, the inner truth. Get to the inner truth. The window is closing on that. Because you see, raves won't care. Why should they? See, they will have a totally different relationship to the other that we cannot imagine. We can't. There's no way that we can imagine that. There's also no way we can know whether they'll be easily definable, survivable, whether human beings will allow them to emerge. There are many questions that come into all of that. See, we're living in very extraordinary times. But you have to understand something about the cycle that we're living in. It is coming to an end. And it's a big whoosh of that door closing. Because not only is it a cycle coming to an end, but we are coming to the end. We are not the future. And one of the deepest transitions that's going to take place in humanity is that the children and grandchildren of this moment, as they emerge into the world, within their genetic infrastructure will be an aspect that recognizes its own terminality. In other words, we are going to become extinct. Now, there won't be enough time for that. I mean, the door will close before all of that is played out. But basically, our kind of form, the way this form operates, this is a dead end. We are at the very best, till 2027. You're getting the very best of the end of the cycle. Enjoy it while your cell phones work. Yeah? Enjoy it while there's still an internet to have free access to. I mean, there is this endless assumption, that we're going to get on spaceships and we're going to be able to build a fusion reactor and we're going to answer all the questions about the energy we need and on and on and on. And it is not going to happen. And you see this huge movement that has brought us into this contract. We're all under contract in these environments. I mean, from your parking to where you live. It doesn't matter where you are. There's a deal in all of this. Everybody's got to grease somebody else. Everybody's got to pay for somebody else. Nobody is providing themselves with their own essential needs. Not equipped. None of you are equipped to really survive. You're not. You have benefited from a cycle that says, don't worry. Vote for me, I'll look after it. You know? So you give authority away to the politicians and the priests and God knows what. You know, your boss, your this, your that, and everything else. You know, as long as you can continue to find your little place where you can maintain your little survival. And we have bigger and bigger supermarkets. But how are you going to get the trucks there? I mean, you know, this age that we're living on the cusp of it. It's like flying over the Alps. It's amazing to fly over the Alps now. I mean, the glaciers are going away. I mean, you can see it. It's the first time that I've been able to see it. You can really see it. You know? And in the south of Spain, it's becoming a desert. I mean, we have real huge changes, and everybody thinks that they're all disconnected things. And what I really want you to grasp is it's all one thing. It's one huge mutation that's taking place. Already the population authorities are beginning to see that we are headed towards a break in this endless increase in population. They're beginning to see that by 2050 in their calculations that we're going to have the beginnings of a long-term drop. We don't have to worry about that. There are other things that will do the work rather than just birth control. You know, we have entered into an age of high-tech viruses. You know, bird flu is one of the scariest things that anybody can imagine. It truly is, only because it is a precursor of so many other things that are at work. In North America, the biggest boom business now is being at the reproductive end of the pharmaceutical industry. You know, in other words, you know, being able to develop better fertilization techniques, better artificial techniques, whether, you know, in vitro fertilization all the way to cloning, you name it, all of these things are being explored at a very fast rate because you have an enormous decrease in fertility. Enormous. I mean, sperm counts in males in Europe has dropped 70% since 1950. I mean, that's just, you know, what's happening to our species is that we're peaking. You know? This is the peak. It's, you know, I was born in 1948. I've actually been able to see it because I missed the war. I've actually been able to see planet Earth at just about its best, which, by the way, you know, it's nothing to get a medal for. It really still looks rather shitty to me, but nonetheless, you know, when you put it all together, it's like, well, not bad. This is the achievement of an old form. You know, this is the achievement of the same form that built the pyramids in Giza. It's an old form. This is just the modern pyramids. Old mechanism. Old mechanism. And all we're doing is that we have been riding this crescendo of improvement that was all part of the seven-centered being's life. And you see, this nine-centered form that we have, it's an awareness machine. It's an awareness machine. You know, it's so sophisticated. It's so sophisticated. Most of the sophistication we don't have access to because it's all being focused into the developing solar plex center. But it also means that in this era, this kind of knowledge, and I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about human design, the kind of knowledge comes into the world where it actually gives you an ability to understand how you work. It's our gift. It's our gift. Everything about evolution is about form. You know, I am here to teach form principle. It's what I teach. Don't teach the spirit. It's not the point. The point is that this is all form. It's all form. Think about your design crystal. So magical, eh? Your design crystal does 99% of the job. And your personality crystal has a hard time just trying to figure out what's going on. Right? Your design crystal builds this incredible construct. Brain, eh? I mean, brain is really something, isn't it? I mean, it's something. Where does mind come from? You know, is it the spaces between the sparks of the neurons? I mean, it's incredible. All you have to do is build a certain kind of box, and all of a sudden, like magic, it thinks. The personality crystal is designed to interpret the experience that the box gives it. We have a fabulous mechanism. We have the ability to look at ourselves, but not this surface. See, the only holy thing for you is to become a god or a goddess. And I don't say that to be cute. It's so clear to me that each of us, in our uniqueness, are an absolute authority. As absolute an authority as any god that ever existed in anyone's imagination. I had a wonderful, he's still alive, old friend of mine. Somebody that I met in my first days when I disappeared and landed in Ibiza. And I was introduced to him. And he introduced himself to me as God. And I thought that was rather cute. You know, gotta have a lot of nerve to introduce yourself as God. And I said, nice to meet you, God. I'd never met you before. It's a pleasure. And he said to me, well, you don't believe me, do you? And I said, hey, you know, you want to call yourself God? It's okay with me. He said, look, I want you to understand something. He said, when I die, I'm going to take you with me. I'm going to take everything with me because I make it up every moment. I'm God. You know, in my universe, I'm God. And of course he was right. It's true. It's all made up. I mean, you only exist because I store you in here. You don't exist because you're sitting there. That's none of my business. I don't know. You know, you exist because it's stored in here. And when I go, hey, you're gone. Eh? I take you all with me. We live alone in here. It's all alone and it's magical. As long as this thing in here doesn't think that it's smart enough to know what to do with this. You know? This is when you really get into trouble. Eh? The moment the mind says, okay, we're really smart, right? Yeah, sure, we're smart. Okay, well, all right, let me tell you what to do. This is when we really have a problem. What it's here for is to be able to take in, at the deepest possible level, information to get to a point that the information doesn't matter anymore. The mind only wants to know one thing. It's this big, huge question mark. It's always there. Doesn't matter what variation of the question it is. There is just this question. And however you think you understand your question, whether it's about why or who or when, or, you know, whatever the question is, doesn't make any difference. Until this passenger understands that it is absolutely helpless and incompetent. I mean, absolutely helpless and incompetent. Only then does the passenger have a chance to benefit from this form. See, because this form was made for that. It wasn't made for trying to figure out what to do with your life. It wasn't made for trying to figure out whether you should have sex with that person or not. It wasn't made for all of those things. It's not what this nine-centered vehicle is about. It isn't. It was its design is literally to give us the capacity to know who we are at the conscious level. On the surface in human design, what you get is that you get a strategy for the vehicle. that strategy for the vehicle takes away the authority that your mind has had over you. It begins a process. But if you're honoring your strategy, if you're a generator and you're responding, it doesn't mean that your mind is responding too. It doesn't. Not at all. Your mind is still going to be your mind. And it doesn't matter whether your body has an answer and things seem to be better, Your mind still has all its stuff going on. Because you see, when the mind looks at the body and sees that the vehicle is actually meeting less resistance, it doesn't assume it has anything really to do with that. The mind doesn't really care about all that, doesn't want to. And the only way that you can transform mind is that you have to make it small before it can be great. You have to put your thumb on it. I do a program, a 3-year certificate program I'm teaching, which is called Rave Psychology. And it's about mapping the way in which the mind works. Because everybody's mind works on a track. Everybody's. I can actually draw out the way your mind works in the way that somebody can draw out your chart. And everybody thinks their mind is their mind. And that it's somehow special and different. And it isn't. Human beings' minds, because they operate as not self, all of those minds are conditioned by similar forces and actually interpret the world similarly. All of which does not lead to your mind seeing the way you were intended to see. See, these vehicles were not worker vehicles. See, I know that. I'm a manifester. And I used to have slaves. How I miss my slaves. It was so nice. There we were for thousands of years, being able to push all the generators around, which was really great, and get them to build stuff. Build stuff. Build. You just keep building stuff. The manifestors didn't do much building, but they had a lot of generators working for them. It was great. Wonderful era. 7-centered era. Work. Think about the world until the 9-centered vehicle came. And think about how many people could even read anywhere in the world. And most of the intellectuality of the world was limited to a few oddballs and a lot of holy rollers. Work. This was the worker bee design. That was it. I understand now, sort of, because I'm not a great fan of Buddha, but I understand why he was so annoyed with the body. He didn't want to work. He was probably a manifestor, who knows? Didn't want to work. It's a working vehicle. Let's get out of this one. Don't want this one. The 9-centered vehicle is not a working vehicle. It's a thinking man's machine, It's an awareness box. It's an upgrade. The problem is that we've got this consciousness that is still all caught up in work. Work. It never stops. I got so tired of it where I live because all I ever see is construction cranes. They never stop. It'll be nice when the door closes and all of that. Work. It's one of the jokes about becoming yourself. It's a real handicap to be an adult and meet this knowledge. It just is. Right from the beginning. Because you're already messed up and you're already deeply conditioned, and it's tough to get rid of that. It really is. It's not a nice thing. It's for children. This whole business of having to go through this process and trying to get rid of all that stuff and whatever, it's very difficult. And the thing that makes it difficult is not that the process itself is particularly difficult. It isn't. The circumstances are. You know, it's like getting an education from me. You got to be rich. No, it's true. I mean, if you really want to be educated, you want to take all the things that I teach and blah, 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 and buy all the products, poof. Money. If you're a projector and you want to change your life, you better have money. You know, because you're going to have to walk out the door. You know, and you're going to have to really do it. And you don't. Everybody's caught up in the material plane. Everybody's caught up in the relationships with everybody else. You don't have freedom. You don't. You're locked into the material plane because this is the builder's world. It's the builder's world. How many generators can radically, overnight, simply go, all right, I'm only going to respond. I don't care what happens. You want me to come to work today? You better call me up and ask me if I want to come. And I don't care if I get fired. And if you want to make love to me, you better ask me. You know, and on and on and on and on and on. How many generators are ready to do that? Eh? Ready to pay the price? Not many. No, I'm going to be part-time. I'm going to do weekend generator. You know? I don't want to upset Joan or Jane or Jack or whoever the hell it is. I got enough problems dealing with myself. Yeah. See, we're caught in the worker world. It's worker world. You know, everybody on this planet is stuck on that plane of fundamental survival. 3 billion people on the planet live on less than €1 a day. You cannot imagine that. It's a nice statistic, but there's no way you can imagine it. Worker world. And we're not designed for work, which is why we're so bad at it. We're terrible at it. Not only are we bad at work, you know, 70% of humanity have an open ego. So they're always trying to prove something by doing a job that they were never supposed to do in the first place and getting paid less than somebody else who's already doing it. Worker world. Changing your life is quite a trip. You know, it's quite a trip. When you're an adult, it's really something. You know, I know. I've been watching it now for nearly 20 years. I've worked with a lot of people. You know, I can smell in them, you know, their need for transformation, and yet the boundaries of the Maya for them. And most of it is the restraints that are there because of their minds. It's your minds that get in the way. You know, it's like my thing with generator women. You know, this thing about waiting, that everything that's right for you, that everything's correct for you will come. Let it come. Don't look for it. Don't ask for it. Don't want it. You don't know what you're waiting for. How can you? You don't know who you are. So how can you know what you're waiting for? You don't. You're just waiting. Now, either you're insane or you have a lot of courage. Otherwise, you don't do that. You don't do that because your mind doesn't like it. You don't do that because the world around you gets in the way. It gets in the way. For 20 years, I've been telling women to sleep alone. I mean, I will tell men, too, whenever they're there. You know? Sleep alone. Right, sure. You know? And then they go home and they say to Harry, look, Harry, I want my own bedroom. I want a divorce. You know, I mean, they go nuts. I mean, you know, nothing more frightening than a man who doesn't think that he could at any moment make love to a woman simply because she's in a bed, son. There's this deep insecurity in the male ego. I don't think it's in the ego. I think it's somewhere. But deep insecurity about being in one's own space. Smells like rejection. It isn't. And by the way, as a male, I can tell you that when you sleep in your own space, you never want to give it up. Ever again. As long as you live, you know? They'd go home and they would never say anything. Every once in a while, they sort of mention it, you know, to kind of see the lay of the land, you know. They actually get to the point where they enjoy those arguments where they can just, you know, drag a blanket away and go sleep on the couch by themselves. And it's like, isn't that nice? You know? But the real integrity of the experiment, it's out the window. Well, you know, and 50% of them are unemotional, you know, so they avoid confrontation and truth. If you have all those people that are avoiding confrontation and truth, if you have 50% of humanity that cannot deal with the other, it's just built into them. How are they ever going to explain to the other what they need? They can't, and they don't. See, the thing that's so interesting for me, from my perspective, is that when I was given the knowledge, I assumed immediately, so simple, this is it, you know? I mean, give me a generator, please, you know, and I'll tell them, and that's it, you know? Boom, basta. There they are, wide awake, everything's terrific. No, it doesn't work that way. You know, you finally come up with a floor plan that's perfect for everybody, with wonderful, wonderful strategies that actually work. No bullshit involved. Straightforward. They work. You can check it out yourself. You know, all that stuff. And personally, just me personally, maybe I've dealt with 60, 70,000 people directly. They're not all walking around like Buddha. They're not. They're caught in the working machine. And they don't have either the circumstances or the trajectory or geometry or good luck or choicelessness or helplessness that allows them to radically transform their lives, because it's a radical process. It is. See, for me, it was obvious that the knowledge was for children. It's like with my own children. I don't teach them human design. I don't. It's not something that is necessary. I treat them according to their design. And because it's around in their lives, obviously they ask questions. And there are times that they get explanations for this and that, and it's just kind of a natural process. But the difference isn't that they have the knowledge. Knowing human design is an adult thing, because adults need to be deconditioned. But for children, they simply need to be raised correctly. You know, if you tell one of my children to do something, nothing happens. Nothing. And it's not because they're going to say to you, we're generators. It's because they have been raised that way. Nobody tells them what to do. They're asked. You know, and if you raise human beings according to their nature, you don't end up with all of this stuff. You don't. You don't. And at a very early age, it's very easy to discover your authority. It's very easy to begin to see that you don't have to live out your strategy. It is your strategy. It's even simpler than that from a child's perspective. For an adult, with all of the complexities that you've been dumped with, you know, the philosophies and everything else, and all of the layers and layers and layers of historically recorded pathways. You know, you could do this and do that. I remember my great horror trip to Los Angeles to teach, and the woman that had organized the event wanted to show me the advertising. I never had such a good laugh. She brought me in a magazine of this big, you know, one of these huge magazines, but that thick. It had nearly 2,000 sort of newspaper quality pages, And on every page must have been 40 or 50 esoteric ads. There must have been thousands, and this was a monthly publication. There must have been thousands. And there I'm watching her, and she's going through this collection of endless, you name it. I mean, if you want to have your feces magically tested, you'd find it in that kind of a thing. Anything, eh? And then she shows me this little quarter patch and this 8 zillion. I mean, there's so many things out there. You can see how confused it is. I love hearing all of these people talk about how much information is on the internet. Yes, that's true. How many people can absorb any of it? Or some of it? You know, how much of it can you absorb? The real dilemma is just the way you live. You don't live as yourself. It's what it's all about. I mean, everything that I do in this job is about trying to remind people that, yeah, you have no idea who you are. I mean, that's something really to grasp at the deepest possible level. You can't imagine who that being is. You can't. You can't. You know, the way in which you see. Underneath every single line is something called color. It's a motivation. And it's something that's always moving. So when you're not correct, you lose your true motivation. It's true for just about everybody. So it means the way that you're driven in this life, the way you're pointed to see the world around you, it never has anything to do with you. That you live out your life through your openness means that it has absolutely nothing to do with you. That you use your mind to make decisions based on your openness, because that's where the not-self comes from. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. Nothing. And then you wonder why, you've got problems or this and that, or whatever the case may be. It's not even your problem. It was incredible for me for years. I did so many individual readings, and I realized how much people didn't like themselves. Self-hatred was the most common thing that I met. And if not self-hatred, then, give me another design was basically the theme. Anything but what I am, so they would say. But, it was a terrible black joke. Because the person that they hated wasn't them. Had nothing to do with who they were. Nothing. Nothing at all. I mean, it's the thing to understand about the limitation of being based on genetics. Because genetics is the story. The whole infrastructure that we're built on is an infrastructure that says we have to make more. It's the only thing that genes care about, is making more. Because if you don't make more, you die out. It's the basic defense system of any bioform, is its ability to be able to reproduce. And how does that work in us? The way it works in us is that genes are very clever. They say, well, we don't want anything like us. Right away, we have a problem. And the gene says, look, we can't have anything like us, because if we have something like us, then we're going to end up with retarded, deformed children. And the gene pool's going to collapse. And that'll be the end of the story. So genes don't like that. They don't. So we are designed only to be attracted to what is not us. And of course, everybody knows that in their lives. The strongest genetic pull you have towards anyone in this life is towards somebody who's different than you. And when the glow is over, the problems begin. Because that difference in any other language, in our language, that difference is conditioning. You're saying, taking that in, and when you take that in, you become it. You become it. You become the conditioning that's in you. You don't live out who you are at all. And so you end up with human beings that do not operate correctly, do not enter into relationships correctly, do not have intimate bonds that are correct, do not produce children that are children who are going to come into a functional environment, and it goes on and on and on. And everything about this genetic attractiveness that is built in to us, it's all used by your minds. All of it. So you come into the world, you have an open emotional system, and the not-self strategy of your open emotional system is a strategy that says avoid confrontation and truth. So you have a problem with someone. You know, they said something that really upset you. And what does your mind do? Your mind says, no, we better avoid this. You know, let's not deal with this. And the mind will come up with a reason not to deal with it. There's all these set packages that are available. And it's coming up with that reason because it doesn't want to deal with the emotional intensity that will come into their life the moment they confront that person with, you said something I didn't like. So they don't confront that person at all. They begin to live a lie. They begin to think the problem will go away by itself. And every time you're going to make any decision, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter what it's about, your openness is creating the platform. Your openness is laying the foundation for the way in which your mind is going to make its decision for you. And your mind doesn't make a decision for you. It can't. But it does. You accept it over and over and over again. Always based on the same criteria. Always based on the same patterns. You never get to live out who you are. It's like people talk in design who talk about their profiles. I mean, why bother? I mean, a profile is something that, it's like a piece of clothing. If you're correct, it fits. And if you're not correct, the sleeves are too long and the pants are too long and it all looks funny and it's got bulges and tears and it just doesn't work. This is about purpose. It's about the fulfillment of purpose. See, the mechanical. This is the only way to be able to satisfy what we are in terms of our inheritance from that seven-centered past. The only way that we can enter into this time now is that we have to allow our vehicles to operate on their own. On their own. Because they are able to do that. They don't need your mind to tell them what's going on. They don't. You know, I mean, if I stick a couple of toothpicks in here deep enough and I lobotomize myself, my body is going to keep on eating. You know, it's going to keep on keeping on. The vehicle will keep on doing its thing. It just so happened that the hardware got a little damaged. But the vehicle has its life. It's much more sophisticated than you think. Everything you experience is your existence. It's this. It's the machine. We're only here to watch. To watch. You know, you look out the windows and you watch what happens. The vehicle will live its life. Your bodies will live their lives if you let them. If you don't interfere. You know, I used to, I have a very provocative hat I wear sometimes. It just says no choice. It infuriates people. Which is nice, because I like that. It's nice to infuriate people. And they say, well, how can you say there's no choice? We've got choices all the time. I know. It sure looks that way. It really does. It's all an illusion. And it's very, very difficult for human beings to get past the surface. It's the hardest place to go. I mean, most human beings are only stuck on the surface. It's just the surface. You know, how you live your life, how you pick your partners, you know, how you pick your friends, how you know where to be, how you know how to make a decision that you yourself can trust absolutely in your life. That's not a guess or a hope or a dream, but is a natural function of your process. These minds, because they're so deeply attached visually to the life, they distort everything. And they make you afraid. And it's fear that holds people back from becoming themselves. It's fear. There's this deep fear of what you may lose. And even greater is the fear of not knowing what you will gain. Because you don't know. It's like stripping yourself down to nothing. See, when an adult enters into human design, basically they're entering into a 7-year mystical death. You know? If you follow any kind of, you know, esoteric stories, the mystical death is one of them. You know, the need to die to one life to live in another. And it is a death process. And it can be very difficult and uncomfortable for many beings. It's not natural for an adult to decondition. It isn't. Not only is it not natural, but you discover that you're alone. I mean, really, alone. Because human beings don't process the world this way. When you walk out of here and you go and sit in a cafe, listen to the conversation. You know? And listen to the grammar in the sense of just the way the verbs work. Everybody is into I do, I have to, I must. You know, I did this, I did that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. On and on and on and on and on. It's all this box working. Full time. Never telling the truth. Never telling you the truth. Never allowing you to actually be a part of the decision. And that's what's normal. I mean, that's what's normal. That's our world. You know, every day during the week I do a radio show where I do the neutrino forecast. You know, I describe the imprint as it's happening each day. And I'm a news junkie. You know, I love information. So one of my favorite games is that, you know, I will look at the transits of the day and then I turn on CNN. And the talking heads are talking my lines. You know? They're just saying what's there in the transit. And what's going on in the world is just what's there in the transit. It's just there. You know, so all of a sudden you have Neptune in the 13-2 in the line of bigotry in the 13th gate leading to the throat. You know, and you've got 35,000 cars burnt in France. You know, you got the leader of Iran saying that he wants to blow people up. You go all of a sudden, boom, like that. And they're all talking about it. It's on everybody's lips. Because there are no individuals out there. There are no unique beings out there. There's just this huge homogenized openness. And you all follow the program. You know, I had a woman I know say to me, well, it's terrible, this program. We're all puppets. And I said, yes, not self-puppets. Yes, absolutely. If you want to see a puppet show, just watch humanity in the program. And you got yourself one huge puppet show. I hope you all live to 2027. Mark my words. You watch the movie as the lights go out. These are just patterns. And we're helpless in the patterns. You know, it's not like you can do anything about it. As I said, this is not practical. It's about awareness. And it's about understanding that this is the best opportunity that you're ever going to have. And for you to recognize the responsibility of your good fortune. Because you have great good fortune. Just to have the luxury to contemplate such things, let alone anything else. And the access to a physical strategy that literally will transform you. But you have to see that for your minds, there's a place to go. Because of the very nature of this vehicle. This vehicle is there to be able to allow awareness to shine. You know, if we are coming to the end of our process, if that is so, then everything about it is that we are here to fulfill the potential of these vehicles. I know from my own capacity to grasp that it is possible to understand how it works, because I understand how it works down to its minutiae, and it's extraordinary to be able to see the mechanism. And what you get when you see the mechanism, or what you receive when you get the mechanism, is nothing but humility. You know, it's what you get back. You know, you get back the recognition that we truly are helpless. Helpless. It's very hard for human beings to consider themselves to be helpless. They don't like it. They want to be in control. You know, you all want to be in control. And the beauty of that is that there is a way. I mean, you know, each and every one of you have this possibility of being able to have your own authority, operate correctly, and then have a chance to open up your minds. If you understand definition, it is so narrow. The definition that's in your design, those activations, they all go down to a base. Hey, line, color, tone, base, tiny, tiny, tiny little thing of arc. And all of that fixedness that's in you, how limited it is. Narrow, 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 fixed line. And that narrowness through a very, very specific vision, in a very specific way. Nobody has that but you. Nobody. So if you're not correct, an aspect of what this Maya is all about is lost. It's lost. Because you see, only you, through your uniqueness, is qualified to describe your universe. Nobody else. Nobody else can measure you against this person or that person. I mean, think about the world you live in. Everything's measurement. You know, the Ma and Maya, the Sanskrit for measurement. It's all measurement. You know, this one's bigger, faster, smarter, prettier, on and on and on and on. It's all measurement. Endless, 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 endless measuring. When you're unique, and you know it, loving yourself is not a problem. There's no competition. You know? There's no competition. I love myself for the very fact that there's nothing else like me. How terrific. You know? And nobody can say to me, well, you should love that one more. You know? I mean, there is only one like me. There's only one like you. There are no other kinds. Never have been, never will be. And yet the way your consciousness operates has nothing to do with the beauty of that. Because your minds are not unique at all. They're rather boring. They're homogenized with the basic way in which you're trained to see, the way in which you're conditioned to see and feel. by those around you, by your openness, by the way in which it impacts on you. Your mind does not express your uniqueness. Your mind expresses opinions and ideas that are conditioned in the field. There's stuff that you just take in, that you identify as being yours and turn into decisions that you expect yourself to believe in. It's all insane. You know, your mind, this is where the dilemma is. It's easy to follow your strategy compared to what it is to deal with your mind. Anybody who's involved in human design beyond just basic interest, you know, you have to dig into the material. And you have to begin to feed your mind examples of its foolishness. And there's nothing more important than understanding the not self. You know, if you can understand anything about where we are going, because understand something, the cycle we're going into is in no way supportive. We're living in the most supportive cycle you can imagine. And you can see that by the way in which the world operates. We've established all of these, international institutions and this and that and blah, blah, blah. We're going into a cycle that is almost savagely individual. And the theme of community is all going to disappear. And not overnight, nothing does. I mean, I've described the age that's coming as a dark age, and in many ways it will be. You know, the light begins to dim the moment we move away from the first line themes that we're in now, that we've been in since 1960. And the great reward for all of us in this time is that there is essential information waiting so that we can transform the way we operate so that we can get to one place and one place only. It's my goal, is to liberate as many human beings as I can to their own authority. Their own authority. If you cannot operate on your own authority, remember we're living in an age where that's not allowed. We're living in an age where everybody tries to take your authority away. I mean, just advertising, as an example. It's constantly trying to take your authority away. It's constantly trying to tell you that it's this, or it's that, or it's the other thing, or it's new, and it's improved. And there's only one thing that matters, is that there are human beings that are going to be equipped to operate out of your own authority, because that's what the future demands. And if you cannot operate out of your own authority in the future, you're going to have real dilemmas, because there is not going to be a communal infrastructure that is going to be there to look after you. It's not going to be there. You're not going to have all of these things. You're not going to have all these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations that do all their humanitarian, liberal, social, blah, blah, blah stuff all over the planet. You're not going to have a United Nations. You're not going to have any of these things. We'll be lucky if we can hold on to even nation states. All of this has been a construct of this era. And we're at the end of it with, 22 years left out of a 400-year cycle or so. We're at the real end. And it's only now that you have to see that at the gateway of this process, it's not so much you. I mean, it would be nice, but your children, your children's children, they have to be equipped. It's not the same kind of world that we've been used to, where we're equipped in the way we have been equipped. Where we're told to pay attention to this and that institution, where we're handed over to be guided. In the tribe, in the village, you do that. The 4037, this underlying theme that's been there for hundreds of years, reinforced by all the 4037s. Why do you think you have a human design school Veen, cross of planning back there? Part of the cycle. Organize it. Make your bargains, do all the work. This is what this time is about. It's coming to an end. And we all know, in one way or another, there are enough voices out there beginning to say we've got problems with maintaining this or that. There isn't a country, a wealthy country in the world today that can honestly say that they can support their senior citizens 50 years from now. Every single one of them, those programs will be bankrupt. And they all know it. They don't know what to do with it. It's just a fact. The post-war generation was an enormous bulge, and then they got rich and had less kids. And then the less kids have to pay for these enormous numbers of old people who won't die. They refuse to die. The 4037 has given us wonderful health care, wonderful institutions, good plumbing, all of that stuff. It's all this era. And we take it all for granted. You assume that it's going to be there, the buses are going to run and blah, blah, blah. You assume that the zillions of tons of food that have to come into this city every day to feed this community, all of that takes enormous organization. All of that is maintained by the cycle. And it's going out the window. And it doesn't mean it'll disappear overnight. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. There will be children born just before the turn of the wheel. They'll live 80, 90, 100 years. They will carry that information into the next cycle. Not that they'll carry it successfully. Those things will just continue to deteriorate. We've had examples of this kind of thing before. We've been through dark ages before. We've been through times where the general, social and cultural environment is collapsed. And you end up with pockets that survive in different places, but basically the themes change radically. We're going to face the same thing. And what we're facing in return of that is not simply that we have a cycle changing. The cycles change every 400 years or so. It's more than that. This cycle is coinciding with a physical mutation. And it means that certain things are changing. And one of the most important things to understand is that rave children are not designed to eat meat. And it's something to understand about the future. The human food chain, thanks to Pluto, has been infected. And that food chain goes through birds, reptiles, fish. All those aspects of the human food chain have been impacted detrimentally by Pluto in the last 5 years. All of them. And before that, through the fifth gate, Pluto impacted all the plant life. Now, one of the things to understand, Pluto is the gatekeeper in all of this. Do not forget that Pluto is also Hades and is the lord of the underworld. This is a swan song dance. When Pluto entered into the 26th gate, which was many, many years ago, I began to warn people that we were going to get new diseases. And it's not just the birds, there are things going on in the fish population that have not fully surfaced yet. We already know that there are diseases that are operating at the reptile level that are destroying, for example, frogs are being killed all over the world. Mysteriously, they're all dying off. We have a deep, deep impact that's taking place in terms of the way in which our food resources are going to work. And it's clear to me that, we are going to have a great deal of difficulty in the future us, humans, in even being able to successfully digest meat. I mean, after the break, when I come back, if you give me the wheel, I will talk about the mutation itself. And here in the 1949, this is where we're actually going to have an enormous impact on our lives. It is going to disrupt our lives in ways that we didn't really think they could be disrupted. The 19th gate is deeply significant. It is the pressure that is there at the very source of our basic tribal needs for territory, for food, and for God. They're all there in the 19th gate. And the 19th gate, here, the polarity is the 49th gate. And beside the 49th gate, in the emotional system, is the 55th gate. Now these two gates, they're what the whole story is about. It is, in fact, the 55th gate, the gate of abundance, that is the gate where the mutation is actually taking place. Now, if you look at it as a codon in genetics, that the 55th gate is the codon histidine. And histidine is a codon that only has two chemical variations. That is, if you look at the codons in the body graph, there are only two hexagrams that relate to the chemistry called histidine. That is the 55th gate and the 49th gate. So these two gates in the solar plex center, both of them pointed towards the pressure system of the root, these two gates carry the same chemistry that is being transformed in this mutation. Now obviously it means a couple of things. It means that those channels, as we understand them in design, the 3955, the channel of emoting, and the 1949, the channel of synthesis, these channels are changing. But there's more than that. There's something very dramatic that will happen in 2027 when the whole process of the mutation is initiated. And what's going to happen is that the bridging between the 19 and the 49 is going to stop. In other words, the 19th gate, if you have a 19th gate and you have a 49th gate, as of 2027, in essence, they are not defined because they are not going to impact each other. And that means that the 19th gate is going to be isolated from what is the normal communal experience of humanity. And basically what that's going to bring about is that we are going to be threatened in terms of our resources. We are going to have deep dilemmas spiritually. And again, I'll talk about that because we're living in an age where you can see the results of this already. And that we are going to deal with the impact on our spirituality, on our faith, on our resources, on our loyalty to others. I mean, all of these things, the way in which we operate, the way in which we've operated in the past communally, all of that is going to be changed. I mean, Ilse and I the other day were driving together and she said, you know, I don't want to live during that time. And I said, no, either do I. It's not our world. I mean, we may get to the doorway of it. Many of you may live into that era, long into that era. But you will know that it's not yours. I mean, it's clear. This is our time, man. This is our flowering as a species. You know, this doorway leading up to 2027, this is an extraordinary time for us, for all of us. It can be absolutely magnificent what it does for us in terms of being able to awaken us in the deepest possible sense so that we can appreciate what it is to be in these forms, to be here, to go through this process. Because it is extraordinary, but this is a very narrow window. The other thing is to be able to prepare for the future. Now, I teach a program called Rave Cosmology, and one of my main goals in Rave Cosmology is to train people to be able to recognize these children when they arrive and to be of service to them. You know, the ultimate altruism in that sense of, you know, being able to nurture the arrival of one's replacement, so to speak. But that's really what it is. And it's something really for us to understand. Our human experience at this peak, there's only one thing. There's only one thing to get, you know. And the only thing you have to get is that you have to get what it is to be you. You've never known. And I don't mean that in the mundane sense. I mean that in the most spiritual of senses. For you to understand that existence does not work without you. You know, there are many things that I can teach people, you know, dream rave. You know, all of us are programmed while we sleep. The forces never need to worry about us when we're awake. You know, whatever we mess up while we're awake gets corrected while we're asleep. It's very nice, easy program. I mean, we're not exactly respected in that sense. You know, we do have our limitations. But it's so important to get it. Everything that we're here for now, everything is to know, to understand, to make sense, to be able to grasp what it is, and then to let go. Surrender. Just surrender. And you can only do that when you give your life over to your vehicle. When you give your life over to your vehicle, you can begin the process of getting this passenger of yours, this mind, to begin to see that it's just as controlled and set up as anything else. And that all you have to do is let go of being in charge of your life. Let go of the vanity that it's up to you what's going to happen. Let go of the fear that says that if you don't do it, somebody else will. If you don't act, nothing will happen. If you don't act, you will miss this or that. To get to the point where you are just in tune to the physical world you live in. And then you can find yourself. You can find this authority through the authority in you. You can find this being that's unique. And it's worth it. I can tell you, it's worth it. It's wonderful to see the world without the mind being concerned about me. My mind doesn't have to worry about me because it's not in charge of me. It doesn't make my decisions. I'm not waiting for my mind to decide what should I do. You know? The only thing you can do is watch. It's a good watcher. I mean, I have an unconscious mind. I don't even know what I'm going to say to you when I sit down. I have no idea. I have no script. While I'm doing this, I'm not thinking inside of my head, what should I be saying? What theme should I be talking about? I have no idea. I listen like you do. Sometimes it's interesting. No? You know? Mine's gorgeous. It's wonderful. Look at how good it is. I give you good mind. You know? I give good mind. Eh? You know? Everyone's expected to give it back. But I don't want your interpretation of somebody else's mind. The homogenized 97th variation, you know, of Greco-Roman, European civilization claptrap. You know, fused through whatever tribal culture you happen to be. No, this unique mind. A perception that nobody else has. Nobody else. You know, this program I do at the end of the week, looking at all of the 32 nodes, the 32 nodal oppositions. I only have one. I mean, I only see in a certain way. There's 31 other ways of seeing, you know? And who's expressing that? Who's telling us what can be seen there? That's what it's all about. That's the beauty of mind. That's when having a conversation with somebody isn't about opinions or ideas or knowing. It's about difference. Difference. You know, this treasure to be unique starts with your strategy. Okay, let's have a break.